Just want to make this a general discussion video about Thomas Pynchon, and basically I've been reading him for, I don't know, I'd say about like the past 2 years, but I've been reading the books several times because ever since I discovered, not really just from engaging with it, the first book I read was Crying of Lot 49. From reading it and rereading it, I was just completely floored by it. I I love writers. I have so many favorite books, a ton. Um, the the Great Gatsby, Moby Dick, Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, the Aeneid, Shakespeare. Love Paradise Lost. I love, but I love so many other great books too. I love the Lord of the Rings. I love the Harry Potter books. Um, I've really, I've read anything that ever seemed interesting to me was something I would just read and just kind of go for it, and things over the years, just kind of accumulated. And if you find an author you like, you tend to read more of their books. Like Cormac McCarthy, I did that with. I think I read all his books. John Steinbeck, same thing, and you just like get varying degrees of appreciation for what they do and what they do uniquely and what's kind of special about them. William Faulkner and Ernest Hemingway. Just a lot of things that people that other people considered classics. A lot of times, to be honest, the titles fascinated me. And hearing the way other people would talk about these books, I just I liked reading. Why not give it a shot and see what's there. J.D. Salinger too is one of my favorite authors. So I guess I like a lot of different books, but especially ones that get taught in schools, and normally they force people to read. Like The Scarlet Letter by Hawthorne is it is such an incredible book, and I know most of the people probably just turned this off because I said that. They absolutely trash that book in high school. They ruin it for you because you have no concept of what he's coming from, what his tradition is, and what visual painting you're about to witness when he starts painting his scenes. If you have never read Hawthorne, don't start with The Scarlet Letter. Read his short stories, which are amazing. They're very similar to Edgar Allan Poe, but they're funny. They're really he's a damn good writer, an incredibly gifted genius. But they all have this common thing. Edgar Allan Poe too, I love. They have this thing where they go into this style of momentness, like of just like, we're doing this and we're doing this and we're doing this, we're doing this. You're not getting lost in what I think a lot of older, the people who wrote the big books in the 1800s. A lot of those people, they don't care about every little thing, they don't give every little thing the attention of why they're writing the book. It's different. It's not as poetic for a lot of people, the act of writing a novel. You just fill it with characters. It doesn't make it less of a creation technically, less of a book. The same number of people may end up loving it, and that's could be just as good. But Pynchon does something really fascinating, because I love poetry. I love John Keats and Byron and Hart Crane and T.S. Eliot and William Butler Yeats and Shakespeare. I already mentioned a lot of the longer poems I've read. But these people have these incredible gifts. They have this incredible ability to, among all the people that I've mentioned so far, they have this kind of, I'm just going to call it a communion with their gift, and they let it run wild, and you can watch the artists develop in really interesting ways. John Keats is one, especially you can do that with, because you see him starting, and he's it's nothing compared to where he went. But Thomas Pynchon, he definitely has that thing too. But I've never read anything by him that it wasn't really, really fascinating. But he has a book of short stories, and you can kind of see the one at the end, I think, is one of the best short stories I've ever read. And the other stuff is, probably just as good. I haven't read everything in it, but it's probably very, very good too. But I would be surprised if it's as good as the short story. It's called The Secret Integration. It is amazing. This is what Pynchon does. He takes pop culture and, sort of similar to what Andy Warhol and people like that did, where you take pop culture, anything on the world can become a fragment of his long poems, which are all novels. Mr. Crying of Lot 49 is 152 pages. You have to read it twice because it's like a poem that you just kind of, you don't know what you're kind of witnessing the majesty of when it first happens. But it's just a series of incredible scenes, equal to an opera or an incredible show that you're seeing live, really, because it's just kind of, when you see an actor who's just like tearing up the stage, who's just like, again, that same phrase I'm going to use again is in communion with their gift, and they're just having that faith and letting it all out there, just absolutely tearing it up. Movies is the majority of what we see, but the same kind of thing is present there. There's this theatrical, dramatic presentation of it. Okay. I'm just going to read the beginning of Gravity's Ring, but I'm not going to read, I don't even think I'm going to read a whole page. But this is the way the book starts. 1. Beyond the Zero. Nature does not know extinction. All it knows is transformation. Everything science has taught me and continues to teach me strengthens my belief in the continuity of our spiritual existence after death. Werner von Braun. I didn't know when I first read this, but Werner von Braun developed rockets, basically, and he did it for the Nazis during World War II, and afterwards he helped with the American space program, a gifted physics genius, basically. So this is Pynchon's beginning. A screaming comes across the sky. It has happened before, but there is nothing to compare it to now. It is too late. The evacuation still proceeds, but it's all theater. There are no lights inside the cars, no lights anywhere. Above him lift girders old as an iron queen, and glass somewhere far above that would let the light of day through. But it's night. He's afraid of the way the glass will fall. Soon, it will be a spectacle, the fall of a crystal palace, but coming down in total blackout, without one glint of light, only great, invisible crashing. So there you go. That's the first 2 paragraphs of the story. He's going to use language the way Shakespeare does, and the way the absolute best poets can possibly do is that they're going to reconstruct the words around them. Every word and phrase is going to be speaking to the sounds of the words around it that you've just read, in the general vicinity of wherever any one word falls in it. There is a musical song being played with what's just the words around it. So listen to this. He's afraid of the way the glass will fall. Soon it will be a spectacle, the fall of a crystal palace. So that word spectacle and glass is going to be kind of reconstruction, put back together in crystal palace, coming down in total blackout without one glint of light. So again, we're playing with those L sounds a lot, but also with the T's and C's. only great invisible crashing. And that's a very vivid scene. Basically, what's happening is this person is in London during the Blitz, and I'm not actually sure if they're even firing the rockets down, but basically they're getting, the heck bombed out of them by the Nazis, and there's no point in running. It's going to get them. Things. He say the evacuation still proceeds, but it's all theater. Something to make them feel better, because there's nothing else to do, in that they share this common doom. Now, the doom that he's talking about isn't just the war, because obviously a lot of them will survive the war, but it's the massive being forgotten, which we're almost 80 years past. So, if you were probably above the age of 10 when this was going on, you're probably no longer with us for the most part. So that's the disappearance that they're going to, be doomed from. But not just that, is also the wars and the bombs raining down on them is going to cause this kind of thing. Now, when this happens, there's a very, chemical way when the fire, the V2, they're just bombs. They just explode, and they just cause these massive shifts of change. And that shift of change is going to be constantly related to sex and conception. Now, the massiveness of the bomb makes the poet reminded of the massiveness of humanity altogether, but also how, because we all share the same fate, which is death, that destiny, because it's shared, is makes it difficult to believe that we were ever really here, that our existence, that we ever really were individuals, because we're going to be reabsorbed into entropy, just death, that we're all going to this this same place, which is non-existence. So now, this is a very common thing in poetry, is using death and life as a constant, kind of like the lotus, maybe, in yoga, of this infinite cycle of bringing things together and taking them apart, and constructing this beautiful image and then undercutting it with reality, just mixing truth and beauty in maybe a balanced way. So now, when you think about that, how what is going to be happening in this book, which the story is very, very sexual. It's a very bizarre story too. Is basically this guy, he's an American GI in Great Britain, and he gets erections when he's in a location where a V2 rocket, which are developed, I think, in the last season of the war in Europe, that winter, and they so it wasn't for a very long time that they were falling, but the implications of a rocket that you could launch vertically hundreds of miles, that became such a big part of the 20th century with the threat of nuclear war. So that is very much, the book is about World War II, but it's not just about World War II. It was written in the 70s, and it's very conscious of the fact that it's being written in the 70s, years later. In fact, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure there's even a part that takes place in the 70s. But most of the book is in World War II, and now there is a whole bunch of, there's an organization called the White Visitation, which is monitoring him, and monitoring lots of different things basically there's some kind of branch of, I think, the British government, or just the this conspiratorial real government, that's both allies and Axis kind of put together somehow, and they're consulting all kinds of weird things like psychics and mystics and my God, what were they list? There's a great section where he lists exactly what they are, but that's it couldn't be a more ridiculous story. It's basically his dick works as a dowsing for wherever these rockets will be falling, and the reason you find that out is because he has a map where he keeps the locations of all the girls he knows and has slept with, and he puts little stars on them. And very early in the book, someone goes into his office, finds this map, takes a picture, and brings it back to the white visitation people who, statisticians, it's just like all kinds of things. It's basically, they're like a tiny organization that symbolizes the whole war effort. In terms of the military and the people who aren't actually doing any fighting. And this map matches exactly to all of the rockets that are falling on London. So it's ridiculous. It's not really taking itself that seriously, but at the same time, there are moments in this that are as artful and deep as anything I've ever read. So, back to what we were saying before I got sidetracked by how sexual it is, was reading the introduction from that, with that idea in your mind of basically a screaming comes across the sky. So that line means a couple different things now. A screaming comes across the sky. It be a baby cry. It could be a woman's cry. A scream. A woman's scream. Oh, I'm thinking of Crying of Lot 49, which actually is the same idea. It's the sound, any sound, a cry, a laugh, a scream, anything that will ultimately be muted. Basically going back to that same idea of where this thing goes. That all human life, we're all born for ultimately death. But exactly what death is always going to be something of a mystery. And like there's, I mentioned a second ago that there were psychics, but there is magic in Pynchon's books. Mason and Dixon especially, there is a ton of magic in America, and in Gravity's Rainbow especially there is as well. But so I think that, I don't want to go on too much longer right now, but that's a good introduction to what Pynchon is as an author, and what he does when he in certain times in their works, and I've known other authors to do the same thing, but don't have works that are so immortal as others. Like Cormac McCarthy has a lot of really good books. The book Blood Meridian is there's something else in there, like it's like a cornucopia of good ideas that all create this one kind of painting under a common subject. And but there are also some Cormac McCarthy books that don't suck, but aren't probably as worth studying. That wouldn't be you would eventually run out of how many ways you could look at something and kind of turn it over. But with certain things, that's not true, and that's what I'm saying about Pynchon, is that his works are infinitely deep, which is a very rare thing in literature and just in reading altogether, in any kind of study. Once you find something that has that, that can be discussed and contemplated forever, you've found an incredibly gifted artist, really a genius, who has been able to keep this faith, this incredible faith that commits them to their gift, and they are able to explore and develop that genius, which is ultimately a testament to human perfection and what we are capable of as a species in terms of what we're doing in whatever subject we undertake, in this case, words. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. Take care.